Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Louise Browne. Looking forward to this conversation, Louise.
Hi, me too. I've been excited to see you in person for a long time, as much in person as we can, right?
Yeah, as much
Nice
as
to see
like
you.
6,000 miles away.
Thanks for having me on. I lived in England when I was in 1989 for a year
Okay, where did you
in
live in London?
London. I went to school. I went to school there. So, I lived in London in Knightsbridge, but I went all over. It's like I'm an
Knightsbridge.
Anglophile. Yeah, right.
Knightsbridge.
Well, it was at
Wow.
school. Shared a
Yeah.
room with six people. So, yeah.
So Knightsbridge is where Harrods is, listeners. So it's a really
Yeah, it's really
safe,
nice.
safe ride. It's
That
it's yeah, yeah.
Yeah, when you're a student, you live better than like when you're an adult, right? We were just talking about that.
Yeah. So London's 200 miles from me. I'm 200 miles north of
hmm
London. But we're 6,000 miles away because you're in
Yeah.
California. And you told me the name of the town, but I still didn't like Luis to something.
San Luis Obispo. But I'm actually in a town called, it's even smaller, called Atascadero. So there you go. That's like, don't even try.
Yeah, I'm not going to give that a try. No. So love talking to fellow podcasters.
Yeah, me
We've
too.
not got fellow adoptees, fellow podcasters, because we're not just got our own learnings. We've got all the learnings that we've gathered over the years from our other
Yeah.
conversations. So yeah, what does healing mean to you, Louise?
What does healing? I knew you were going to start with that. Let's see. I was thinking about this last night. I listened to a couple more episodes on your podcast and just that you had the healing question. And I've been going through a lot of healing lately. I don't think as adoptees, maybe even as people, but for sure as adoptees, we're ever really healed. I used to think so. I used to think, okay, I'll get some therapy, figure that out, I'll be healed. This will, have a good relationship, figure out my stuff, I'll be healed type of thing. And the more I'm into this, I just think it's a process every day, kind of like working on healing. Um, I think the word that comes to mind for me is grace, like giving yourself some grace for how we are. Like this morning, my husband and I had just a small discussion that was maybe more heated than normal. And I went right to my triggers, right? Like, oh, I'm not capable or lovable or all those things. And I sat there for a minute and I thought, okay, I need to like now I can sit there because I know enough and go, okay, this is a trigger. I'm reacting ridiculously. He's staring at me like, what's wrong with you? That kind of thing. But now I can sit there and then I can sit calmly say, okay, I need a moment. That triggered me type of thing. But this is ongoing. I mean, I'm 55 years old, right? So I don't know. Healing to me means giving ourselves grace, having a community, meeting you, other adoptees. Our podcast gives us healing. I'm sure it does for you as well, just talking to other adoptees and other people that feel the way we feel
Yeah.
inherently, you know?
So healing is, if we look at it at a micro level, like
Mm-hmm.
this little example that you brought up from this morning, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of catching ourselves in the moment. It's grace. It's presumably bouncing back faster rather
Yeah.
than yeah,
Yes. That's a good way to put it. I think just having the forgiveness for ourselves in a way, because I think from what I've encountered, and I probably my podcast partner, Sarah Reinhart, would say the same thing, is that over the last 3 years on our podcast, it's story after story. People have a lot of shame, guilt, rising above that, I'm worthy feelings. It's funny because people are very accomplished and still have these feelings, right? We're still little kids wanting to be loved or accepted. And maybe that's humankind, but I think we have an extra layer of that as adoptees. And I think I've just learned to like be kinder to myself. I used to think, okay, be busy, be the good girl, get things done, be awesome at my job, be awesome at this, but you're running from something, right? So it's learning to sit with the uncomfortable, learn about yourself, you know, um, maybe having grace for other people in the conversation as well. It's hard to sometimes listen to other points of view or people saying, listening to an apology or maybe having the hard conversation. It's just about healing. It's just about going through every day trying to make it better. I don't think it's like we're ever gonna, I feel like we're a little bit like the bucket with the hole in the bottom. And maybe the hole closes up a little, or you get in a place where the sand doesn't just pour through, but it's still gonna have the hole, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe lifelong, you know?
Yeah. What are we forgiving ourselves for?
Being unwanted, right? I mean, or something, or not being the baby to keep or someone to love. I don't know. That's the question. Like I always feel like I'm guilty of something that I'm not guilty of, you know?
Yeah. To me, it sounds like it feels like forgiving grace feels like forgiving ourselves for our feelings.
Yeah, maybe. It kind of makes me a little bit emotional. It's almost mm, like seeing yourself as a baby. Like I've tried to, Sarah was saying on our podcast to somebody that interviewed us that she cringes thinking about like going back to your baby self, or how people say embrace your child or whatever, inner child. But for me, I feel like I'm starting to feel bad for that inner child like a little bit. I used to just be like, well, I had a great adoption. I had nice parents who loved me and a loving family. But now I'm starting to be like, okay, I was taken from my mother. I was with her for 6 days. I was a really quiet, self-soothing baby. I pushed people away. Like I didn't do anything wrong. I just was a baby, right? But I think somehow in our psyche growing up, we think, oh, I've done something wrong, right? I better behave so nobody's mad at me, but let me push you away. It's all those contradictory feelings. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that?
There's
So,
so much there. There's so much there.
right?
I had so many questions. The first one that came to my mind was, have you interviewed many people who, and any therapists or anybody, and have you done it yourself? This parts work stuff where you look at the different parts of you. Have you done anything around that?
Well, yes, in my own therapy, we've interviewed lots of different therapists we've had
Yes.
on.
Yeah.
We've had on Anne Marie Morello and Moses, Pharaoh, all sorts of trauma therapists. And I learn from their podcasts when we're interviewing them, I'm learning the whole time they're talking, right? Um, and probably to be honest with you, I'm learning from every guest that comes on when they're talking. I feel honored to even hear their stories. Like, why am I worthy of hearing this story, right? But for myself in therapy, I feel like I've had the right therapist more recently in my life when I went through a lot of family counseling around a divorce. I found the right person who asked me the right questions. Even though she wasn't an adoptee, it started to be like, you can talk about, your family or your mom or your feelings, and you're not guilty to bring that up, you know. You're
Yeah.
allowed to have some pushback. And that's a big thing, is just being allowed to like, oh, okay, I can talk about this with somebody very openly. That's a big thing. Therapy is helpful
So
in any form.
in
Yeah.
any form. Um, so the parts work is the one that came up for me when
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about, your relationship with you're thinking about your little baby, yourself as a little baby. It's that
Mm-hmm.
parts work. Um, but some of the things that you just said then got me really thinking about what I was saying a couple of minutes ago. So for me, it's like I used to worry about worrying, right?
Yes, I like that. Yeah.
Or
I should
be
put that on my wall. I used to worry about worrying. I think I still worry about worrying.
I used to, and somebody blew that apart for me. A guy from the US, a mentor, coach, author kind of a guy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think he lives in Santa Barbara. I'm not sure. Guy called
Oh,
Michael
that's
Neal.
near me, by the way.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
A guy called Michael Neal, and he's not in the adoption space.
Right.
Um, but he is a kind of third generation of practitioner, guy of
Mhm.
something of a philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
created by an adoptee, actually. There
Oh,
is a connection. And this guy was a Scottish guy called called Sydney Banks. Have you come across this guy? He's not alive.
no.
He's not alive anymore. He
Hmm.
didn't. He's an adoptee, and he had an awakening experience on a marital harmony weekend, uh, and yeah, and it changed. It changed his life, and he created something called the three Ps. It's called the three Ps.
I'm gonna look this up.
And Sydney Banks with a Y.
Okay. With a
Yeah,
Y. I
with a
feel
Y.
like I have seen it.
You might
Maybe
have
you've
seen it.
posted about it. I don't know.
He lived in yeah, he lived in on Salt Spring Island, which is off Vancouver in
Yeah.
British Columbia. So a couple of 100 miles north of you, I would guess, maybe a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. Yeah. So this guy trained some people, and then that guy trained some people, and one of the guys, the third tier down, was this guy called Michael Neal, and he was the one that helped me see this, worry about worrying. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so what, Simon? You're
Right.
worrying. So what? Why are you
Right.
worrying about worrying? And then, and so yeah, great. Somehow that comes to mind. That comes to mind when I think of grace. And then another one would be for me, perhaps closer to what many of us would consider a classic kind of trauma response, and what I think of
Mm-hmm.
as my trauma response would be uh, angry about being angry.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I know that one too. Because then you're angry and you're so upset yourself for being angry. It's the
Yeah,
weirdest. Yeah. And then you're embarrassed by being angry. And
and
it's,
this guy Michael Neal, he talks about becoming a moron. Right, we've
right.
got more on our mind, so
More on
we've
our
got
mind.
worry, and then
Yeah.
worry, and then
Yeah.
worry, and then
Yeah.
worry, and then worry, and like, I've done all this work. Why am I still?
Right. Oh
I've
my
achieved
God.
all this. Why am I still worrying? I am a good guy. Why am I still worrying? People
Hmm.
like me. Why am I still worrying? What? And it just,
Yes,
the answers lie way upstream of thoughts and way upstream
they
of
sure do.
feeling. Like talk, and way upstream of story.
When you're saying worrying, I'm thinking anxiety, right?
Well, yeah,
Because
worry about worrying
that's
would be
me.
called anxiety, but I've never called it that. For
Me
some
neither.
reason,
No.
I've never called it anxiety.
Listen, my nickname growing up, besides I had a few nicknames, I had Heisman from my dad because he was a football player and I pushed people away. So, the Heisman trophy with the hand. But my nickname from all friends and family, because I'm Louise, was Wheezy, right? Well, when I was little, it was always like, oh, Wheezy's worrying. Oh, worried Wheezy. It's like, okay, no, I mean, I just thought, oh, I'm a worrier. And my son who's 25 now would be like, Mom, I'm fine. Why are you worrying? All this. And I'm like, it's my thing. I'm trying so hard in life not to worry. But what I've really realized, it's anxiety. And the anxiety comes from not knowing, from abandonment, right? I think it's so, like you said, upstream. It's so in our core that it gives our minds something like, I think it's almost like who was I talking to? But it's like your mind is when you're a baby and you're taken from your mom, you're not you're kind of searching constantly, right? For security. And you may go into a family, you may go into foster care, you may go somewhere that's horrible. No matter what it is, you're going to adapt quickly. Like, this is how I get food, this is how I get love, all of this as a baby, but your mind's still constantly searching, how do I fit? From when you're little, right? So you start to have this worry, like hypervigilance. I was always really aware of my surroundings, watching people. I've never slept well. I still don't sleep well. I sleep better now, because we know all the things. Do your breathing, you know, like you learn your stuff, so you put it away. I put mine in a little box and then I'll open that box tomorrow. I do all these mental games, right? But it's still there. I'm still such the worrier. It's funny worrying about worrying. That's just
Yeah, and so what? So what?
Right? So
So
what?
what?
It doesn't change anything. That's one thing I've really realized through the last person that I worked with. Um, she was like, she had a really good analogy I'm going to share here. I don't know if I've ever shared it, maybe somewhere, but she would say, okay, I'd tell her all these things like, okay, this is happening. And if this doesn't happen, this will happen. You go to the extremes,
Yeah,
right? For sure.
dominate.
Some,
Yeah,
yeah, if you don't hear from someone, they're dead on the freeway, right? It's like you go right to the negative, right? There's something, even though I'm a positive person, I think that would surprise people as I go right to like, oh, that person's for sure dead now, or that this is going to happen because the plane will crash, whatever it is, right? So she said,
catastrophization.
yes, thank you. Looking for the word. So she was like, okay, can we, where I used to see her was outside, it was in an office building that looked down on an old cemetery. So she would say, can we look at the cemetery and like look out the window, pick like a grave site and like, put all your worries, put all your stress and anxieties in that grave and let's have a little funeral for it. Like in your guilt, whenever I'd have anything like guilt about something I did during parenting that haunts you every day. You just talked to me about something with guilt, like you keep it, right? Like I feel so bad I did this or bad I did that. And she'd say, let's go bury it, have a little funeral for it, feel sad. You can embrace it. You can say that really sucks. That's there. And then come back and visit it. So like you can go away. Do you bring that to breakfast with you? Do you bring it to work with you? No. You can come back on Sunday and visit that guilt. So it gave me a space to like visualize, whereas putting my anxieties and my pain and my guilt, and I could visit it, but it's not going to be with me every day. You don't live in the cemetery, right? So it's kind of an interesting analogy. It's like the one thing that stuck with me from all those years with her. I was like, oh, I'm going to bury something and then go visit it, but I'm not going to live in the cemetery. I don't know if that makes sense. It's kind of
It
a long
does.
story.
It does. So yeah, I'll sum it up with something from another mentor, coach guy of mine, a different guy, a Brit guy. This one. The past is a place of reference, not a place of residence.
Ah, I like that too. You have some good ones.
I do, and
You
I've got an
do.
even better one than that. I've got an even better one. I don't often swear, right? Uh, Feeling shit is as natural as having a shit.
Like that one too.
What if
Hmm.
feeling shit doesn't mean that we are shit?
Right. Yeah.
And I go back to
I
the
like that.
I go back to the Californian guy here, right?
Hmm.
Michael Neal. We've become emotophobic.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
have, as a society,
Hmm.
and we have become emotophobic. How
Hmm.
are you doing? We lie. In the UK, we lie. Fine, not
Oh,
bad,
for sure. Yeah,
not
for
bad.
sure. Yeah, I'm fine.
We talked about swimming, right?
Hmm.
We've at the Tadcaster swimming pool. They've had an outbreak of something for the last 20 or so years that I've been going there. It's called not baditis. Not bad.
Not bad
How are you
itis.
doing? Not bad. Is that the best you've got? It's
Yeah,
not the best you've got. It's catching.
it is.
It's
Well, gosh, I mean,
infectious.
people are so in there. What if you ask someone, they're like, I'm not that well today. It's like, wow, okay.
But we've all become emotophobic.
We have.
But then
Hmm.
what about us? What
Yeah,
about us and our trauma? Like
yeah,
our trauma's going to drown us.
yeah.
Our feelings are so freaking scary. Like
Yeah.
10 years ago, I was sitting on a train to London reading a book about this sort of stuff. And I absolutely lost it with somebody else on the train who was shouting in his mobile phone. And
Um,
I leant over to him and I said, "Would you mind keeping your voice down?"
yeah.
And he didn't. And he was shouting. And the next minute, I was over to him. I prodded him on the shoulder, said, if you don't shut up,
Yeah.
I'm going to put your head through that window.
It just enraged you.
It raged me.
Yeah.
And that's scary. So,
Yeah.
like, we're emotophobic
Mm-hmm.
in the Western world.
Yeah.
And as adoptees, we've got even more reason to be emotophobic,
Yeah.
because the feelings that are coursing through our bodies scare the bejesus out of us. So no wonder.
Yeah.
But I wasn't clear what I meant by upstream.
Yeah. Tell me.
I didn't mean up. I didn't mean up. I meant upstream, beyond our feelings,
Mm-hmm.
beyond our thoughts, to who we are. We say, you said, I am a worrier, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
identifying with
Mm-hmm.
with a habit, right?
Right.
I am a worrier. And I can say that as well. I am insecure. I'm insecure about business, or
Yeah.
I am insecure. I'm insecure about business. Like, so I identify with the feeling. We identify with the feeling. But
Mm-hmm.
here's the thing, right? How we feel isn't who we are.
That's right. I like
How
that.
we feel isn't
Isn't.
who we are. We are not
Yeah.
our trauma.
No,
It's not us. How we think
it's
is.
not us.
But we're obsessed with how we think. We're obsessed with how we feel, and we're
Of
doing all this
course.
hard work to try and change how we think. I need to be so I've been on my learning journey 17 years, whatever,
Yeah.
since I came out of the fog. Right. So why aren't I making more progress? Why aren't I feeling
Yeah.
better? Why aren't, but, but that's why grace.
Yeah. Grace
Great.
fits.
I said, what are we forgiving ourselves for? And you gave
Mm-hmm.
lots of different things. But
Mm-hmm.
what stood out for me is, what are we forgiving what do we forgive ourselves for our feelings, rather than trying to push them away, like,
Yeah. To pretend they don't exist.
well, pretend they don't exist, drown them with alcohol.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
so I haven't listened to all your podcast. Have you had Pamela Karanova on? Yeah,
No, but I know her now,
you
and
know,
we'd like to have her on. We'd like to have you on.
yeah. Well, I'm ready for you whenever.
That'd be.
That'd be cool. Uh, she attributes. I don't know how you pronounce it.
Mm-hmm.
She attributes her biggest healing to stopping pushing her emotions away.
Yeah, I agree. This because in the last I've been coming out of the fog for 3 years. I mean, really, it's taken this long. I didn't even know there was a fog, a community, any of it. Okay. So the last 3 years, I embrace how I feel. And I think in some ways, it shocks. I'm starting to, not overnight. You start to kind of say, I'm allowed to feel this way. I'm in a writing group with other adoptees that Anne Heffron runs, actually. And she always says there's like a level, like a hand, like a flame, right? So if you can, we're always trying to burn at this level, but there's something keeping the candle down, right? But if you can go around and talk about it, you can still keep your stuff there because it's not going to go away. Like we're still going to have our arc over us that kind of, like you said, will it ever go away? I don't think so. You're in this 17 years and you're still saying, oh, I'm a worrier, but you don't identify yourself as your emotions anymore, right? So I can say I have this and this, but I'm able to look at it now and have my emotions and say, okay, I'm allowed to get mad. I'm allowed to not feel like everything's okay. I used to be the one in my family that, when we had an incident, my mom and dad, who are now deceased, both my parents have deceased in the last few years, my adopted parents, I'll call them my mom and dad. That's what I
Yeah,
call them. They came to visit me in Los Angeles. My son was probably in the third grade. We had a new house. I was with my ex-husband. And my brother wasn't there, my adopted brother. He's not an adoptee, he's their child. So it was just our small family. And everybody was like not getting along in the kitchen. It was too much time together, the whole thing. And I just had hurt feelings, like, but I was pushing him down. So I'm trying to make everybody happy and who wants what to drink and make sure the house looks great. And is my mom liking, is my dad, everything perfect, right? And I just kind of lost it. And I went in the bedroom and just laid down and was crying. I just was like, I can't deal. Like everything bubbled up, all this weird stuff around everything. And I'll never forget this. My dad, who actually is kind of my biggest ally in my childhood life, he came in the room and he said, "Hey, Weeze, are you coming out, you know, to have dinner? What are you doing?" I said, "I just need to sit here for a minute." He goes, "We don't know what to do when you're like this." Like he literally said, I thought about this just the other day. This memory came to me that, well, if you don't come out, well, we're not going to have any fun because I'm the one that makes everybody get along, right? And I thought, wow, it was so eye-opening. I wasn't out of the fog. I hadn't really dealt with a lot of this stuff, but it impacted me. I remember thinking, well, why do I can't I have a bad day? You guys are always having a bad day. Everybody's having their problems. Why can't I? And I realized what a fixer I was. Like I was that kid in the family. I brought some joy. I made sure everybody was happy. And meanwhile, I'm rebelling and I'm growing up and going through all sorts of stuff and nobody asked the right questions. Why is she doing all this? I just thought I'm crazy. So you keep it to yourself. You push down your feelings. Something's wrong with me. I don't want anybody to see that. So let me just tootle through my life, right? Pushing things down. And anger is under the surface there too, because I can get really angry. But now I let myself get angry because it's so bad to keep it in. That's how we have illness and
So
all of it.
as you were sharing what your dad said to you, um,
Hmm.
he said, "We don't know what to do when you're like this." I I heard it as, you're upset. We don't
Hmm.
we don't know what to do to make you not upset anymore. Not we don't know what to do if you're not here to guide
It's
us.
probably both. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so
Like, who am I if I'm not putting on a happy face, right? Like, what do they do with me? You know? And
well
I
we
think,
yeah.
I don't, I think that was always my thing. Like, I just tried to blend in and fit in and like all of us, I feel like every adoptee that comes on and tells their story to us, we can have vastly different adoption stories. But right away, I'm like, oh, I totally get that, or I get this. And it's just so relatable. Everything's so relatable. And I have had friends, I'm sure you have too, people outside of the adoptee community who will be like, well, I have those problems because of divorce, or I have this because of loss. I mean, there's a lot of things. You can lose a mother in childbirth, you can go through horrible divorce, poverty, all sorts of things. But there's something very particular to being an adoptee that's only other adoptees get. That's why I think we have such a problem as a community communicating it outside of the community because people are like, well, what's the problem? Get over it already. I don't know. It's an
Yeah.
interesting dilemma.
So I think, you talked about, we're never really healed. And
Hmm.
a realization that I came to, for me, that really helped last year is looking at healing on two levels. So psychologically,
Hmm.
we'll always be healing, but we are not our psychology. And
Hmm.
underneath our psychology, underneath our trauma, underneath our thoughts and our feelings, that place, some people call it consciousness,
Hmm.
is it was never wounded. And if it was never wounded, it it doesn't need to heal. It and oh,
Wait, explain this more. So like we have our overlaying psychology, which we're always working in, right? Like but underneath then we have the consciousness. Explain that part.
so I don't know which way to go with this. So have you seen me? Have
It's
you seen me
interesting.
doing the fist and the diamond? You see
Yes.
this? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So the fist is our trauma.
Mm-hmm.
The diamond is who we are.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's one metaphor.
Yeah.
But the fist could be our psychology, if you wanted to say. The
Okay.
fist could be our
Mm-hmm.
feelings. The fist could be our thoughts. The fist could be anything, but it's not who we
Yeah.
are.
I like the visuals. Thank you.
That So I'll give you another. I'm trying to give another visual to do. Oh, it's just completely gone now. That's bad, isn't it? And I can't think of that. I've got to give myself.
This happens to me every day. Give yourself grace
I've
for
got to
that.
give myself grace, right?
Yes, you
So
do.
we are not. Think of screen. Think of consciousness as the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as your screen. You're looking at a screen.
Right.
You can see you and you can see me,
Mm-hmm.
but that's the content on the screen. It's not the screen.
Yeah.
So
That's yeah,
consciousness
it's
is
good. Right.
so it's consciousness. You've got two things: consciousness and content.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Consciousness, content.
Yeah.
Screen and movie. Screen,
Yeah, it's good.
mirror and picture.
Yeah.
How we feel isn't
Mm-hmm.
who we are. What we think isn't who we are. Our feelings come and go. What do they come
I
and
do
go?
think
What do they come and
I
go?
do think well, I think that what you think, this is one thing I do believe is what you think, if you think it over and over, starts to become who you are because we believe our own things we tell ourselves in the negative. Like I think I think a lot of
Thinking becomes recurrent
yes,
thoughts, become beliefs, but
and
we're not
habits and
beliefs either. And our
right.
beliefs drive our habit. That's why I'm saying
Yeah.
upstream, right?
Mm-hmm.
So upstream, right? So upstream for me. Think of that that that
Mm-hmm.
that story I told you.
Yeah.
I lost my shit with the kid on the train, right?
Yeah.
The loud kid yelling into his mobile
Yeah.
phone. Right. So my action,
Mm-hmm.
threatening him, came from my feeling of
Yeah.
anger and
Right.
frustration and invalidation and lack of control. I'd asked him to
Right.
do something
Mm-hmm.
nicely, and
Mm-hmm.
he ignored me. Right. So lose my shit, threaten the guy. I didn't hit him. I didn't put his head through the window. I just threatened him, right? So threatened, but it was scary. It was scary. So my action is driven by my feeling.
Mm-hmm.
My feeling is driven by some thoughts going on for me about how dare this guy do this stuff.
Right. Deeper, not
Yeah,
listening
yeah,
to me.
yeah.
Yeah.
When he's why won't he listen to me? Da, da, da. Why isn't he listening to me? Why is he upsetting? Why is upsetting the whole of? Why is upsetting me? I'm trying to read my book. I'm not understanding the book. So I
Right.
can't focus on the book because he's shouting. Right. I'm done
Mm-hmm.
this one. So upstream. So I've gone from my action threatening him upstream to my feelings,
Mm-hmm.
upstream to my thoughts. Well, what's upstream of that? What's upstream of all that? That's my consciousness. That's who I
That's
am.
your yeah, that's your real self
That's my
figuring
true.
this out.
That's
Yeah.
my true self. Yeah. But we identify. Um, we
Yeah.
identify. Yeah. I am a podcaster. I am a worrier. I am an adoptee. I am insecure. I am. Like it's
Right.
the I am bit.
I am. Right.
It's the I am bit. We're focused. We're focused on that.
Yeah.
the what comes after. See,
What
but if
comes,
I keep
yeah.
on talking like this, there's no point coming on your podcast because I'm just sharing my stuff when I'm supposed to be talking.
No, it's fascinating. I'm like, this is really well, I feel like we both have our stories out there. So I sort of like just this conversation is interesting to me. I love healing, the thinking of healing. Like that's what my writing group that I'm in, I wouldn't really say it's a class. It's more like a group led by Anne. It's so healing because of what we actually get to and share with each other that I never share with anybody else. Like what comes out when you're relaxed, when you're heard, when you're really putting aside, like you're not your feelings, right? Like, we had an exercise the other day where she's just picking random words, like, okay, go and write about French toast or whatever it was, a breakfast thing. And you think, oh, I don't want to write about that. The stuff that comes out from that is really shocking when you have a short amount of time to write about something when you're just in a group of comfortable people. What, and it may not be writing for everybody. There may be art or speaking or just anything that where you feel yourself and heard. I think that's kind of what happened to you on the train, right? Like, I don't like not being heard. I always felt like I was never heard. I never had my feelings validated and all of that. So what comes out is the real stuff, like who we are, the essence, and some of it's very beautiful, right? Some of I do think adoptees, like there's so many that don't survive. I mean, I think people are surprised when we do educate them, how many people are, have committed suicide or drugs and alcohol or not doing well. I think that surprises people because they always know I have a friend who's adopted who's very happy, right? So I think that surprises the outside world. But I think when we get here, where you and I are, and maybe some other people in the community, where we're working on this and we have a community about it, I think we're almost super powered now because maybe we had to go through all this to educate others to help, right? Like, I feel like there's a higher calling in it. That's part of healing as well. Like, how do we use our pain and get over, I had a lot of guilt talking about this because, people might hear it or your family or people would be hurt. But once you get over all of that, like, okay, I can talk about this. I'm in my 50s. This is how I feel. I think that's healing too, because it's helping other people that maybe aren't going to talk about it. Maybe there's some guy driving in England on a windy road listening to your podcast who would never talk about this with anybody that somehow feels, oh, that helped me, right? Listening to Simon helps me. And that is another part of healing is for us to be helping. I think we've come this big path to be here. I don't know if that makes sense.
I didn't feel heard on that train.
Right.
You
I
feel
got
heard.
that from you. Like I
You,
got that from you. You didn't feel heard. That's a big thing for me.
you feel heard in your group. Feeling heard.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Feeling heard. It is comforting. I wasn't comfortable.
Right. Right.
I wasn't
And
comfortable.
I feel heard with you, right? Or if you get on some of our adoptee groups that are nice to be in, you can say something and you're heard. You know, hopefully that's you are heard.
Yeah,
There's problems with all groups, of course, but
indeed.
but it's a
And
nice
being validated,
being validated.
being
Yeah.
validated.
Mm-hmm.
But I think validation is a double-edged sword.
Mm. Because then we become what in a thing of our
Well,
own.
I'll give you an example. So 17 years ago, uh, this humongous thought that I have never thought before occurs to me, and it comes with incredibly powerful emotions. I've sworn already this, so I'm going to do it again, right? I'm talking to a coachy type person, and I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
about my birth mother, and I'm talking about the teddy bear. My birth mother, she didn't fucking love me enough to fucking keep me. She gave me the fucking teddy bear as a fucking consolation prize.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The woman Sarah says to me, not your Sarah, a different Sarah. I'm a mum, Simon, and I don't think it was probably like
Yeah.
ping.
Hmm.
The volcano stopped erupting.
Wow.
A little bit of
Just
white
having
smoke,
that.
little bit of
Yeah.
white smoke coming out the top. Bearing in mind, I'd never thought that way about I'd never really given my birth mother much thought at all. But I definitely hadn't thought about that. And I never thought about her. And I
Yeah.
never thought that thought, right? But she challenged the thought.
Yeah.
What would have helped? What would my life have been like? Who knows, right? What would my
Yeah.
life have been like if she'd said, that's terrible, Simon. That's terrible.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
really
She didn't just validate, right? There's some things that, because we all, I feel like we get in these, what's it called when we all say the same thing and we go in a tube together,
groupthink.
like,
Groupthink.
mm-hmm, group thing. So it's like, we can do too much of that. That's why I think it's important that we do communicate, that others know out there, because the more we educate others, the adoption industry will change, number one, slowly. But the more people that know, because if we're just talking to ourselves all the time, we're validating, oh, that's horrible, that's horrible. But then sometimes, like you said, highly doubt your birth mother. That was her, and that was no consolation prize. She gave everything there, right? Everything. I mean, I'm a mother. I can't imagine what it takes to do that, and the suffering that goes on that side, you know. There's so much pain in adoption. That's what's so interesting, is it's a celebration for one group and painful for two others, right? Even if you're a kid and you grow up and you're happy enough as a kid or whatever goes on, there was pain that came into our existence. And so it's weird to see ourselves like, that's part of the healing for me, is seeing myself. I look at pictures now when I was a little baby, and I always thought I looked kind of, it's interesting because later as a kid, you're smiling or you're in whatever. But as a baby, I'm looking very like lost. I can see it. It's so strange. I know you can see a lot if you want to and things, but I just see it differently now. It's like, I'm like, what happened? You know, you're like an alien transplanted into another life. And then you adapt and you grow and you figure out how to make that work. But you're living two lives in a weird way. You're always living two lives. And you can never really fit into one completely. And it's strange. So we have to get to our higher conscience or whatever. You know, it's kind of a deep conversation, but I don't know.
Yeah, it
I don't
is.
believe, yeah, right. And I like your podcast because you do talk about healing, because there is healing to be done. And I met Pamela recently, who you brought up. We haven't met a lot of adoptees because of Zoom, and we do this kind of, Sarah lives in Kansas City, I live in California. And I have a local group here. She's met some people that have come through Kansas City, but we haven't like gone to a big event. And we recently were in New York with a lot of adoptees, as you saw. And that's where I met Pamela in person. It's like, she's such a bright light, and you can see how much work she's done. She's just so, like, she just shines, right? I do think she's found a place to feel more empowered. And I like getting that feeling myself. I feel more empowered now than I've ever felt, but it was such a journey to get here, like so many highs and lows, right? Coming out of the fog was scary. It's shocking when you see the puppeteer behind the stage, the hand that works the puppets. And then you're like, wait, what? How did I never think about this stuff? It's so crazy, all the thoughts that crash in, you know, you know, all of it. What do you think? You're just
Well, I'm
thinking
thinking when
about
I'm going to ask my next three questions.
it.
And I normally call my mum at this time of night. Yeah, but we were chatting before we hit the record button, so that took a little bit of time.
Hmm.
What have been what healing moments, what profound healing moments come to mind for you?
For me, I think I think some healing moments for me, just reading things like reading Journey of the Adopted Self, um, even the primal wound at the beginning. That's how we came out of the fog. So if you don't know our story, really, we started our podcast. I think that we were both adoptees who knew we had stuff because we were adopted, but it kind of sat at that surface level, like, oh yeah, don't hug me. We have t-shirts, by the way, don't hug me, I'm adopted, right? Like, yeah, all the funny things you do when you meet another adoptee, like, oh, I get it, I get it. You just get things. But then we never really, we sat in an ice cream truck for 6 years and we never really dug deeper. A few times we would dig deeper, but we didn't attribute a lot of stuff going on in our lives to any of this trauma. It was always like, okay, I'm an adoptee and I have this weird stuff, but these are my other issues, right? So reading for me, just we read on the podcast. We actually do a book with our podcast. So it's not
Yeah,
like we can't skip the
yeah, I know
reading.
you. Yeah,
Yeah, that's the worst part though, is because we have to actually read every chapter. And some of and we had to do it, timely for the podcast because we're weekly now. And we were bi-monthly back then, but it's like, okay, I don't want to read this next chapter. But then it's like we came out of the fog in fast time because we read every week and then we had each other to discuss it with. And it was so, those were aha moments for me. I remember just laying in bed sometimes just sobbing and being like, oh my God, there's words for what I've been feeling. I think that was the most healing moments, is just having the words. Like if you can name it, it helps. I
yeah,
think naming something helps, like knowing, I mean, not just saying, oh, I have anxiety, but naming, okay, there's a reason I have abandonment issues. It's not just because I'm a freak, right? I'm a freak with everybody else that has abandonment issues.
I'm a
Like, I
freak too.
get it. We're freaks
Can I
together.
get? Do they do these in men's sizes? These t-shirts, don't hug me.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. We have all sorts of
Um, yeah,
insights.
yeah. I used to work with my wife. So I started working with my wife in 1988. And we
Hmm.
got together in 1993. But at some point, that her and another girl that I worked with, they found out that I didn't like being touched. Before we were
Oh,
together, like yeah,
right.
and they were like, and I'd go rigid, you know,
Right. Just kind of
and
pull back. Hmm.
rigid. And yeah, so I could do what I could have done with one of those t-shirts. I am into hugging now, but I've probably still got work on that. Uh, the primal wound for me was um, probably now I just got it. I said that validation was a double-edged sword, right? And
Hmm.
I talked about the negative side of validation.
Yeah.
There's a positive side on the other edge.
Yes.
That's what the primal wound was for me. There was a relief. So I'd done a lot of work. I'd done a lot of work on myself. Um,
Yeah.
I was looking back at my timeline. So I read I received the primal wound 10 years ago,
Mm.
book,
Right.
not the trauma.
Not that
I
I
received the
got that.
trauma 57 years. Uh, yeah. So I'd been doing consciousness work on myself for 7 years before I read the primal wound.
Mm.
But it took me back. It took me down. So the metaphor I use for this one is like you've trying to get a soccer ball
Yeah.
and in the pool or in the sea or a beach ball and push it down underwater,
It comes up.
it comes
Yeah.
up, right? So how I recall this from being a kid is you can push it down a foot,
Hmm.
but it bounces back higher than that. It bounces back
Right.
maybe 3 foot, right?
Yeah.
And that to me is post-traumatic growth.
Yeah.
And that's what the primal wound did for me. It took me down
Mm-hmm.
And then I was talking to a coach lady from the States somewhere. She worked with that guy I mentioned earlier on.
Mm-hmm.
She was one of his like trainees or whatever.
Another cool Californian,
New
maybe.
Californian, yeah. And that's when I realized this second layer,
Mm,
that this unwoundable essence.
mm-hmm.
Our psychology will be forever wounded,
Yeah.
but our essence is untouched.
Yeah.
And I came up with this idea of being fundamentally unwoundable.
Yeah. I like that.
But I didn't come up with it as just a nice little bumper sticker.
No, it was a big
I came up
thing.
with it as a realization, like it's an experience, right? So
Right.
um, the loss is an experience. So
Mm-hmm.
it takes, I heard this, I don't know which one of my guests I heard this from, I should remember. She said, it takes an experience to counter an experience.
Oh, yeah. I like that. That's true. I mean,
So
how many positives do you have to hear to negate a negative, right? So,
you have to, if you've had a negative experience, you have to have a positive
mm-hmm.
experience. If you have a negative experience and you have a positive thought, it doesn't have
Mm-hmm.
the same power, right?
That's right.
It's
Yeah.
like, I don't know, I'm stuck for a metaphor.
No, it's true. If you're, I mean, you have to have, well, that's why naming it and having the words for me, like Journey of the Adopted Self came after the primal wound for us, but that one really was like the ball, right? I felt like you're pushing it down and whoa, big stuff. Every chapter, I was like, holy cow. You know, so I went through like a depression reading that. And the depression was the loss of, it wasn't a depression of I'm depressed. So, I mean, I was depressed from it, but it was more of a depression of loss. Like, oh my gosh, there's words for this loss I've always felt, and I'm grieving it and I'm understanding it. And it's really scary. I'm probably not as much fun to be around right now. My husband's like, who the heck are you? You know, I'm sure all these things were happening, but for me, it was also extremely validating in the positive sense because you're having words to name what you've felt
Yeah.
and other people that have experienced it. I think that's why Journey of the Adopted Self, because she was an adoptee who figured that out late in life, Betty Jean, it resonated too because she wasn't like a 21-year-old therapist saying this. This was like someone who came into it very late as well. And then having the words behind it and the reasons behind it and all the research, it's like, oh my gosh, thank you, you know, but also this is scary. It's easier. It's easier to be in the fog a little bit, even though it's not easier because now I feel more my true self than ever, you know. So I like myself better now. But being in the fog was comfier. I guess it's more comfortable in a weird way, just because you don't have to deal
So
like anything, you know.
I come to a realization about this today, yesterday. I think we will forever be coming out of the fog.
I say that all the time. But it's funny. I always
Maybe
say
I've
I
nicked
think
it
I
from
have
you.
one foot in the fog and then I'm out and then it's a foggy day again.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah. So have you heard me? Nobody talks about what comes after the fog. Right?
Yeah. What comes after the fog, Simon?
Yeah. So we'll play the metaphor, right? We'll
Hmm.
continue the metaphor. Okay. So the fog, like you're going to play along
Lifts,
with me, right? The fog
right?
lifts, right? Okay.
Hmm.
So what's the next thing that you see?
Sun.
Yeah. But yeah, you can see some sun. Yeah.
I'm
But
guessing. Come on.
you become aware of something though, aren't you?
Right?
What are you becoming aware of?
You now see the sky. You see everything you
See the
couldn't see
sky, yeah, you see
because
the
of the
sky, the
fog.
sun, right? Okay. And what else do you see?
Hmm.
You're becoming aware of some trauma that so
Right.
would would the sky be a good metaphor for trauma?
Yeah. The sky. Well, Maybe the clouds are the metaphor for the trauma, and the sky
That's
is
where
sort
I
of
would go. That's
the
where I would
sky is
go.
like I think the sky is the bigger space, what you're talking about, who we could really be potentially if we got through the cloud. The cloud is the trauma. I
You
don't
are
think we have to be our trauma, do we? I
the,
don't want to be our trauma, Simon.
you are the sky.
We are the sky.
The cloud is the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we see when we come out of the fog. We don't
Yeah.
see the sun first. We don't see the cloud first. Sorry, you don't see the sky first. We see a dark, black
Mm-hmm.
storm cloud. We
Mm-hmm.
become aware of our trauma. Our trauma, as you said, the trauma
Mm-hmm.
is the trauma is the cloud. I had to ask you about it, but you got that right. The trauma, right,
Yeah.
and we see we're scared
It's
because
scary.
we think it's scary.
Mm-hmm.
Storm clouds are scary. We think there's a storm coming. We think we're
Yeah.
going to get really wet. We think we might get struck by lightning.
Yeah. It is scary.
It is scary.
But,
And,
but the
we can't see
realization
much.
is
And
better.
then the
No.
cloud, and then the whole sky clouds
Mm-hmm.
over
Mm-hmm.
with jet black clouds, and it's
Mm-hmm.
cold, it's rainy, it's scary,
It's lonely.
it's lonely,
Mm-hmm.
and then sooner or later the the cloud, the storm passes, right?
Yeah.
We see the sunshine and we see the light, and um, and we're still
Here.
we're still okay.
And
I,
this is going further from that, then the storm can come back and I feel like I'm not as scared of the storm now. That's the thing.
Sorry, are
Like
you
this,
inside my head? Because that's exactly what I was going to say.
I'm liking this whole nature evaluation. So like here comes the next storm. I'm like, okay, I can handle that storm because now I know
Yeah,
what
you
that storm
can.
is going to come and go.
Yeah, so you're less, and then sooner or later, somebody points out to you from 6,000 miles away, hey, Louise, to the sky.
You didn't think I was this smart. Never underestimate us Californians, Simon.
To the sky. Why are you bothered about the weather?
No,
Why are you bothered about the weather?
right?
Why? Yeah. So back to my swimming pool, right? The woman on reception, I saw her today.
Yeah.
I see it. She's a volunteer.
Really?
There. She's there. She's a volunteer. See her every Wednesday, right?
Uh-huh.
How are you? And she gives me an answer that's about the weather, and I don't I don't I haven't got I've tried playing it with a few
Yeah.
times, but she doesn't get it, and it's too.
She doesn't get it.
I, but maybe I'll next Wednesday if she does it, I'll say, yeah, you're telling me about the weather. I was asking about you. Right?
Say it. I think you should say it. I think people are so used to not engaging, but being pleasant. But we're so lonely as a community, as a society underneath. I mean, beyond adoption, the
Yeah,
world's lonely
we
right
feel
now.
good. Yeah. How are you doing? So not baditis, right? Not bad,
Yeah,
not bad.
not bad
Or
itis.
fine, fine,
Fine. Hmm.
fucked up, insecure, neurotic,
Yeah.
emotional.
That's what when we're at this
I've never sworn so much on the podcast. I've got an
when we,
idea for
I
you.
love it. I'm a big swearer, so I swear
Uh,
too much. It's a problem. I'm glad that you're not. I'm horrible. But really intelligent people swear. This is what I read recently on Facebook, so it must be
I was going
true.
to swear back at you then.
You
I
can't
can
argue with that.
I can smell my wife cooking, which means
Yeah,
tea
you need.
ready. We've been going for about an hour or so.
Yeah. It's been
I've
lovely.
I've got a request for you to mull over.
Okay.
Um, First off, uh, I think that seeing some of the humanity
Hmm.
in the adoption stuff is big. Uh,
Yeah.
I I think that identity is the biggest issue, and I
Hmm.
don't think that, or I haven't yet found an adoptee who can explain identity clearly to me. And that means I have to go looking outside of adoptees for my clarity on identity. So with that in mind, I'd like to suggest that we do the podcast, but we do it on a book that's about identity and happiness, that's not written by an adoptee, and that we do that so that we do that in that reading format that you do. That's just a
I'm gonna mull that over. And I have to mull that over with.
You don't want to ask me what book it is. Do you want
Okay,
to?
I would like to know the book. What is the book?
Book?
Have you read it?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot.
Making sure. Okay, what is it?
So the book is called You Are the Happiness You Seek.
Okay. You Are the Happiness You Seek.
And it's by Rupert Spira.
Okay.
Spira. And I have read it, but I've listened to it more than I've read it.
Okay.
So,
I like that. I'm gonna listen.
Whichever, yeah. So you won't get it on Audible, okay?
Okay.
So if you go on to Rupert Spira,
I'll go on his.
Rupert, you've got to buy it off his website. Rupert Spira, SPIRA.com.
I'm going on a long drive today, so maybe I will start that actually.
So rupertspira.com. And so he's got a page that says publications, and it's called You Are the Happiness You Seek. And yeah, it's
okay, I'm interested in it because you've listened to it so many times, and it must mean a lot to you. So I would like to hear it. I'm definitely gonna. Yeah, I'm gonna give you feedback on it.
That book is a short one.
Okay.
Some of his audios are like 50 hours long because they're recordings of events.
Yeah.
I listen to all of those as well.
Okay, I'm gonna check this out. Thank you. What can I ask you what your wife's cooking? Because I might just come on over.
It's got garlic in it.
Oh, I want to hang out with you there.
Garlic, yeah.
You have the dogs on the couch and you have garlic cooking. This has just been really nice to get to know you.
I've loved it.
I've enjoyed it. It's healing. See? It's all about the healing.
Thanks, listeners.
Thanks.